We're joined by the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Rebecca Long-Bailey. Welcome to the programme. Now, we carried John McDonnell's critique of the autumn statement in full. So let me ask you a bit about Labour's position. Do you want to balance the books?
Certainly, and we would have liked to have seen more certainty from the Chancellor today. He's obviously abandoned George Osborne's surplus rule, which we thought was inachievable, but he hasn't really given us a date in terms of bringing the deficit down.
But when would you balance the books?
Well, we've got a fiscal credibility rule where we'd bring it down on a 5-year rolling period, but we'd also separate. The way George Osborne used to couple capital expenditure with public spending, we would separate that, so you would never have to borrow in terms of public spending. That would come out of your tax receipts, and that's responsible to do that. In terms of your capital expenditure, this would be kept separately so that you could borrow to invest in the way that Philip Hammond has suggested today. And at the same time, you would bring the deficit down.
But you are promising to spend a lot more on current spending. You've called for the reversal of the universal credit cuts. That's at least $3 billion. You want much more money for the NHS and for social care. That's a multi-billion current spending as well. There's a number of other areas in welfare that you want to spend more or restore the cuts that have been made. So I don't understand, given you're going to add all that to current spending, when you would balance even that bit of the budget.
Well, we wouldn't have made the same decisions that this government has made. We wouldn't have cut capital gains tax, we wouldn't have slashed inheritance tax for the most wealthy in society, and then expected the most vulnerable in society to shoulder the burden like they are having to do so through universal credit and also the cuts to employment support allowance. In terms of raising further revenue through taxes, we've got a tax avoidance transparency programme that we would enforce to give more legal teeth. Well, I mean, £5 billion is what the government intends to recoup, but I mean, pundits outside of government estimate anything between 70 to 135 billion going out of the country in terms of tax avoidance. But what we're concerned about...
How much would you hope to get?
What we're concerned about, well, we'd have to examine that. The problem that we've got at the moment is that the government is scaling back on the resources it has within HMRC. It's cutting the number of offices it's got. It's cutting the number of employees in each department. So in order to try and get an accurate vision of how much money we're actually losing per year, the government doesn't even have those resources itself, so we would make sure that HMRC was adequately resourced. Now, the third point in terms of increasing your tax revenue is ensuring that we get our productivity levels up. The OBR report today, had horrific productivity predictions yet again. The Chancellor referred to in his speech the fact that he appreciated that there was a productivity problem. So something isn't going well for this government. They're not investing in industry, they're not investing in infrastructure, and they're not creating the high-paid, high-skilled jobs of the future that would result in future tax returns for the government.
Why do you want to balance the books?
Because it's fiscally responsible to do so. You can't expect to pluck money from the money tree. It's responsible for the government to invest in the future, but at the same time, you should never have to borrow for your public spending. That should come through your tax.
Well, what other government does it?
Pardon?
What other government does balance the books around the Western world?
Well, there are a number of fiscal positions taken by other governments around the world. It's difficult to pinpoint particular governments who have a 0% deficit. I think it's...
Germany is one.
Well, they've had a long-term industrial strategy, and I think...
as I look at Italy, I look at Italy, France, Spain, the United States, they're not planning to balance the books. So I wondered why Labour thought it was so important.
No, it's fiscally responsible to balance the books, but you can't balance the books at the expense of not investing in your future and your future infrastructure, because you have to balance the books at the same time of ensuring future productivity and future tax receipts.
What would you do to raise productivity?
Well, we'd invest in infrastructure on a larger scale than the Chancellor's put forward today. What he said today is certainly welcome. Some of it's a repeat of what his predecessor had put forward.
That's a long term. It takes a long time for infrastructure investment, A, to happen, and B, to have an impact on productivity.
Well, no, I think there's...
So what would you do to raise it in the first couple of years?
There's a large number, Andrew, of shovel-ready projects in the infrastructure pipeline, and we didn't hear mention of many of those today. What ones are they? Well, I mean, I've got a massively long list that I can email across to you. Well, we've got HS2 that doesn't seem to be progressing very fast. It's electrification of the Midlands main line, which has been halted time and time again. Well, we've got a vast number of them, and they're available on the government website.
But give me a shovel-ready one. I understand the website's full of infrastructure projects, and I perfectly take Labour's point that a lot of them haven't been implemented, but give me an infrastructure project that is shovel-ready.
Well, Swansea Tidal Lagoon is something that the government has been pushing
That would take
for.
years to plan. That hasn't even got planning permission yet.
Well, I think if you look on the government website, Andrew, you can see a long list of the shovel-ready projects if you're so interested to do so.
No, what I see on the point is this.
There are a list
what I see on the government website.
For the government
what I see on the government
today.
website is a long list of infrastructure projects. What I don't see is shovel-ready. I'll give you an example, get you to react. HS2 was approved 8 years ago, so it was hardly shovel-ready. In fact, the diggers turned up last week to begin part of the building in Bucks. They didn't have the right local authority permits. They'll be sent away and they won't be allowed back to sometime in the new year. It's not shovel ready.
I appreciate there are a number of local issues on particular projects and those need to be addressed as quickly as possible, but there are a number of projects that if the Chancellor did a bit of further investigation on, he would find that they were shovel ready. And again, if you look at the government website, there is a long list of those available.
You were the one that
but I do appreciate that, as you said, there are some that are affected by local considerations. But the point is that the Chancellor hasn't even touched the sides in what we need to secure further productivity increases in this country. And it's not just talking about shovel-ready projects, it's about investing in skills and education. We've seen horrific cuts to education over the last few years. We are not skilling our workforce up for the future. We are not delivering the long-term prosperity this country needs.